August 7th marks the 4-year anniversary of David Ayer's Suicide Squad, and since that film also seems to be back in the public consciousness thanks to Zack Snyder's Justice League, I figured I would give it a proper review on this channel. But the truth of the matter is, I tried rewatching Suicide Squad, and I just couldn't get through it. So I decided to do something that I've never done before and actually rank all of the DCEU films. And at the bottom of that list would be Suicide Squad, because the film is such a fucking mess. After everyone complained about how dark and brooding Batman v Superman was, Warner Brothers quickly shifted gears into trying to make their movies more lighthearted in tone. I guess they wanted to capitalize off of the success of Guardians of the Galaxy and Deadpool. So they started by retooling Suicide Squad, even though Ayer had already shot the film to intentionally be dark and brooding. And the result is a hodgepodge of ideas that don't really mesh well together. I hate the editing, the tone is all over the place, the plot is stupid, the characters are annoying, the music is distracting, the humor is jarring, and just about everything else in the film is frustrating. Fant4stic may be a bad movie, but at least it wasn't as loud and in your face with everything as Suicide Squad was. Will Smith, Margot Robbie, and Viola Davis turn in some solid performances, but the rest of the cast is so bad that it doesn't even matter. And I'm not even talking about Jared Leto. I don't know if a David Ayer cut of the film would make the movie any better, since this is the same guy who made Bright, but I can't imagine anything being much worse than this. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I'd want to see it. I'm ready to move on and see James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. I'm sure that'll end up being a movie that far more people will enjoy compared to any cut of Ayer's film. And I'm not trying to disrespect David Ayer. I loved End of Watch and Fury, and I'm hopeful that The Tax Collector will be good as well, but I'm really just over 2016 Suicide Squad. So let's move on to the next movie, which would be Batman v Superman. I think I said as much as I could possibly say about Dawn of Justice in my actual review, but if you want a condensed version of my opinion, here it is. Zack Snyder is a great visual director, and I love most of his movies, but he shouldn't feel the need to deconstruct iconic and beloved characters, especially if his deconstructions serve no real purpose in the story he's trying to tell. BVS is an infuriating experience to me because it expects the audience to be on board with new interpretations of iconic characters without actually spending the time to properly introduce us to said characters. Throw in some poor writing, bad acting, incomprehensible creative decisions, a depressingly dour tone, and ugly cinematography, and you get why I don't like this movie very much. So we move on to Justice League. Whereas Suicide Squad and Batman v Superman made me feel angry, Justice League just makes me feel bad. The film is like a lost child, someone without any guidance or direction, someone who lacks an identity. That's this movie. It's not bombastically loud and infuriating like the films before it. It's just a quietly inoffensive mess that one can easily forget about after watching it. It's a disappointingly lackluster experience with not much to offer. And that's sad to say since the movie contains some iconic and legendary comic book characters. So I guess we'll soon find out which version of the film is better, the visionless mess that we currently have, or Zack Snyder's Justice League. Moving on to number 5, we have Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn. This movie is alright, but I didn't care for it as much as other people seem to have. It's fun and quirky, and I do appreciate that lighthearted tone, but as I watched this movie, I couldn't help but shake the feeling that Warner Brothers was still trying to copy Deadpool. I don't know. Margot Robbie is great as usual, but I'm more excited to see her in a strong supporting role in upcoming movies like The Suicide Squad, more so than in her own standalone films. Because despite the Birds of Prey title, this is definitely a Harley Quinn-centric movie, so the team dynamic felt pretty lacking here since Harley Quinn just took center stage. But if you found the movie to be emancipating, then I'm happy for you. I'm happy to see that the movie spoke to a lot of people, but it just didn't speak to me all that much. At number 4, we have Shazam. This is the first movie on this list that I actually like, and I think that has a lot to do with director David F. Sandberg. I've really come to appreciate his work over the past few years. He's the only Hollywood director that still feels like a down-to-earth indie filmmaker. But that probably has something to do with his awesome YouTube channel, where he periodically releases short films and helpful filmmaking tutorials. But aside from his YouTube stuff, I just really like the tone that he brought to Shazam. It balances horror imagery, adult themes, silly humor, and kid-friendly action quite well. Shazam is just a gleeful experience that is filled with childlike joy. And that brings me to the next movie, Aquaman. I actually really love Aquaman. When this movie first came out, everyone compared it to Indiana Jones, and that's a pretty apt comparison since we basically just watched Jason Momoa hop around from set piece to set piece. And Momoa is so charming, and the action is so engaging that you can't help but have fun, especially considering how silly and outlandish certain aspects of this movie are. You do get to watch grown men talking underwater while riding on the backs of sharks and seahorses after all. Aquaman is just a movie that perfectly knows how to take itself seriously while also embracing its wild and wacky source material, which is something that Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice was severely lacking. At number 2, I have Man of Steel. I've talked a lot about Man of Steel recently, so to recap all of my thoughts, basically, I enjoyed how Zack Snyder used a gritty and realistic first contact / alien invasion scenario to tell a story about a man who was not yet ready to be Superman. Clark Kent is just an ordinary guy who happens to have extraordinary powers, so he naturally feels like a misfit who doesn't know where he belongs. And that perspective finally helped me understand and relate to Superman as a person. Man of Steel may have plenty of issues, like taking itself too seriously and featuring a stoic main character, but it was the first movie that actually got me to care about an indestructible and godlike character like Superman, so I do respect it for that. I think Christopher Nolan would have been a better choice of director than Zack Snyder, but that's neither here nor there. The movie is what it is, and I do love it anyway, despite all of its faults. And finally, the best DCEU film is, of course, Wonder Woman. I thought this movie was genuinely inspiring. I loved the idealism and optimistic sense of hopefulness that this film exuded, and I thought Gal Gadot did a wonderful job as a loving, caring, yet naive character who could also kick a lot of ass. I truly believed that Wonder Woman was the kind of film that would speak to an entire generation of young women and beyond. So over the past few years, I've been surprised to learn that there are a lot of people that I know who don't actually care for this movie. I don't know if that has to do with the simplistic narrative, or because people were still used to Linda Carter's portrayal of the character, or what, but I think all y'all are crazy. Wonder Woman is a phenomenal movie, and Patty Jenkins is the best thing to ever happen to the DCEU. So that's how I would rank all the films in DC's shared cinematic universe. And as you can see, I'm pretty split on these movies. There are 4 films that I really do not care for, but there are also 4 films that I absolutely enjoy. And that's surprising even to me, because before Wonder Woman, I used to shit on these movies a lot. So I'm glad my disdain for these films have finally come around, because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm actually looking forward to seeing films like James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, and I'm very interested in seeing if J.J. Abrams comes on board to direct a Man of Steel sequel. But I guess we'll have to wait and see what kind of direction Warner Brothers wants to take this franchise after the release of Zack Snyder's Justice League. So for now, thanks for watching.